Hello, friends. This video was supposed to go up yesterday, but I didn't turn the sound on the phone, so the video is completely muted. So I'm going to try to do this faster this time. I've had a lot of people ask about my setup for my retro slash kitty sitting streams. As you know, I do all of these things off my phone. Uh, I am able to hook this up to the computer, but I'm over here at my caregiver job. So this is how I pretty much stream things. This is going to go over all the emulators, their performance, what they're best used for, and overall compatibility. So first thing is the GameSir X2 Type C. And this is what I use for pretty much all the games on here. In the off chance that I record from home, I connect a Bluetooth controller wirelessly. But when I'm over here, I find this to be much better. It essentially consoleizes the phone, so you have your full button parity with pretty much any of the modern consoles, so PS2 and beyond. The D-pad is actually quite good. I've heard some people didn't like it. I read a lot of reviews about this controller before I bought it, and people were complaining about the D-pad. I think it's perfect for me. I could see how for certain genres it wouldn't be great, but I don't play those genres. So, I play Tales, I play fighting games on here, Tales games, beat 'em ups, platformers and stuff, and it does the trick. I've been through a number of these consoleized controllers for the phone. I think they're called telescopic controllers. Uh, I've been through a number of these. This is the best one. I think I've bought like 2 or 3 of these at this point. I will say just two major flaws with this controller. The first is, as you can see here, this is the Y button. Well, actually, 3 major flaws. The first one is the Y button and the start button are way too close, unless you have like cat fingers like Groupie here or Bobby there. You're going to pause pretty often. The severity of that will depend on the kind of game you're playing, of course. The second flaw is that, well, this kind of depends. It's up for interpretation. The triggers are not analog, so playing FPS games on this is probably not going to be too good. But for other games, you'll probably like it because you'll have, the button will press and you'll get the same response every time. There's no analog. But for FPS games, it's probably not too great. It also has a built-in screen capture feature, so if you want to take screenshots, you can use that. I think this controller is great. When this one dies, I'm just going to buy another one. Okay, so let's go over the emulators now. Now, I use RetroArch for a lot of the really old consoles, so I use it for Super Nintendo, GBA, Genesis, NES, MAME, and PS1. For the other consoles, it's recommended to use the standalone emulators. They have better compatibility, you have more control over the options, and that by proxy gives you better compatibility as well. But for the older stuff, these games mostly just work. You just turn them on and work. Once you start getting into 3D stuff, it's better to go for the standalone emulators like Dolphin and stuff. But for old, 2D pixel art games, arcade games and stuff, I think RetroArch is just fine. You can see I got a bunch of boomer stuff in here. Got Cave games, Neo Geo, CPS1, CPS2, a bunch of other boards in here. PGM2 as well. RetroArch is actually pretty good for Genesis, especially if you have the Steam collection. Those games are actually ROMs that you can just dump into an emulator. So they're a legal way to get ROMs. Now, has been nerfed slightly because of Sega's a bunch of scumbags, and they took out the Sonic ROMs when they put out Sonic Origins. But the other games on here, it's great to just take the ROMs. You have permanent access to them. You don't have to rely on a shady ROM site. And then you can also use them for ROM hacks as well. Okay, so for Redream, pretty much all the good games in here. Dreamcast is great if you like arcade games. Other than that, it had like barely anything to play. But I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, so I was used to getting really crappy, stripped down arcade ports. The Naomi and the Dreamcast basically had the exact same hardware, so pretty much all these games are arcade perfect. Generally, home ports of the arcade games would have more content as well, so no real reason to try to run a Naomi emulator. So this PSP emulator is great. It's worth the $5 for the gold version. If you have a decent phone at all, like a Snapdragon 730 or above, you can run pretty much any game at 60 FPS, and some of the games actually have 60 FPS features as well. You'll be able to run the games in HD, like for instance, Phantasy Star Portable 2 Infinity has 60 FPS support and right analog stick support, so you can play that game in HD, and it's way better than playing on the actual hardware. I definitely recommend using this for PSP games over RetroArch. It has a lot more features and functionality. What else we got here? This is the big one. This is Aether SX2 PS2 emulator. This is going to be probably the second hardest thing to emulate outside of Dolphin, which just doesn't play nice with phones. I definitely have some games I had to... It's a nightmare to get them running. You have to mess with settings and stuff. For the most part, I have a Snapdragon 8 SD865 phone, so most of these games run fine. Some of them you'll need to find specific settings online. There's a bunch of compatibility lists. You can ask on the emulation on Android, Reddit. Those people will help you if you need specific settings. Like Tales of Destiny Remake, I was just playing that on today's kittysitting stream, and that ran terribly. It stuttered a ton whenever I'd get in a battle, which, it's real-time combat. So that pretty much made it unplayable, but I found the exact settings, and now the game runs pretty much fine, except on the world map, which doesn't really matter. You don't spend too much time on the world map in that game. I will say one thing: if you want to start getting into PS2 emulation and anything around that era, so GameCube, Wii, stuff like that, you definitely want to go for a phone that has micro SD card support. As you know, the phone manufacturers are really stingy and greedy. They give you like a little bit of onboard storage, and then they don't give you any way to expand it. You definitely want a phone that has expandable storage. Like I have a 512 gig SD card on here. That's how I can fit like literal thousands of games. Even though a lot of the bigger games I only have a couple dozen, but it's enough to get the job done. It works pretty well. I would say you might not be able to run some games in HD. It's gonna depend on your processor, but generally, if you find the right settings, the games will at least be playable at 1x resolution. Okay, almost done here. So Dolphin's pretty hard to run. Some games even now I can't run too well. The majority of these games work pretty well. The Tales games, most of the Wii games work fine. Basara's pretty hard to run. I need to find the exact settings for that. But Dolphin is probably the hardest thing to emulate right now. It feels like it's way more demanding than it should be. I guess it's just because of the architecture of the console that's emulating. But most of these games run fine. This is definitely where you'll need expandable storage. So if you're looking for a phone, I'm using the LG V60 right now. It is currently discontinued. LG does not make phones anymore, but you can still find one used on eBay, and it'll probably be barely used at all. There are some issues with the charging port, but it does have pretty much everything you need. An SD865 processor. There's expandable storage. The screen is nice, 1080p, so for games you can upscale. It'll definitely look a lot better than playing at standard definition. What else we got here? DS and Citra, Melon DS and Citra, so DS and 3DS. I haven't had any problems running those. I can definitely say that they are pretty much set it and forget it. Just load the game and it works fine. I'd argue it's a little bit better to play those games on a phone than it is to play on PC, because you'll have access to the touchscreen right there. So it'll be more like the authentic experience playing on those consoles when they were still relevant. Other than that, there's not really anything to really say about those. Skyline doesn't run too many games so far. I'm not really trying to throw too much complicated stuff at it. Basically just a bunch of 2D pixel art games. Most of them barely run. There is Egg NS, which is a nice emulator, but there's a lot of shady stuff about that. Rumors about malware and stealing code from Yuzu and stuff. So I would not recommend using that. Switch the compatibility. It can run like a couple dozen games right now, but most of the stuff you want to play is not going to work, even if you have a powerful enough phone. So a couple of the games in here work. The Messenger works. Blaze Blue. What else works in here? 'Cause Chaos Code works, I think. Cyber Shadow works perfectly. Under Night. Rolling Gunner and Bleed 2. The rest of these games don't work, so if you're interested in Switch emulation, whether you dump the games yourself or not, all these are dumped from my actual console. I would not get too excited. It's probably going to be at least another year. Vita emulation is supposed to be coming soon as well, so when that happens, when that drops, I'll definitely take some of my dumped games and probably show them off on here. That's basically it. This phone can run pretty much everything, so I know there's a Sony phone. I think it's called the Sony Xperia. I don't know the exact model, but apparently that runs the game's about the same as this, maybe a little bit better, and it also has expandable storage. I think it's like $300 or $400 though. For all the native games, I don't have time to really go through those, but you'd be surprised at how many native games have native controller support. Soten does, Dead Cells, Otherworld Legends, Bloodstained, pretty much all these games in the third row, so PGR, LNS Ultimate, Streets 2X, Hero Siege does, Jazz Jackrabbit Maximus 2, Streets of Rage 4, Gunfire Reborn, Scourgebringer. Majority of the games do, and then for the ones that don't, you can use Mantis Gamepad Pro. I have used this program. I've made guides about this program on here on the past. You can go look for those if you want. This will allow you to essentially emulate controller input on games that only have touchscreen support. I can't recommend it enough, but you'd be surprised how many games actually do have native controller support now. So it's not as necessary as it used to be, at least for the good stuff. But yeah, that's basically it. Thought I'd go over my setup. I know some people are curious about this, how the hell I stream and have like a billion games on here. It's basically a combination of just having a decent processor. SD865 is generally what you need to play pretty much anything up to the Switch to varying degrees. The PS3 and 360 are probably going to be a couple generations away. Switch emulation in general is just really, really early. It's really young. It doesn't really run that much. But anything before that, that's not the two HD consoles, you can run pretty well on here. So I hope that helps. If you like retro games, I recommend coming over to my streams. I do retro streams over here when I'm at my caregiver job, and then I play modern games at home. But I work on a lot of older games here. I play some service games as well, like PGR, but for the most part, it's emulators and stuff. So if you wanted me to play older games, then I pretty much do that 6 days a week. So you can come by if you want. It'll be around 6:30 PST every day. I hope that helps, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Oh, I forgot the Saturn emulator as well. I haven't really tested that too much yet. I'll probably do a benchmark on that later on. Thanks for watching.